there, my name is Dana. I'm an orthopedic physical therapist. What I'm going to show you in this video is how to stretch your hip flexors, which you might already know how to do, but I'm going to also show you a way to how to figure out where you need the stretch. We're all a little different in how we're built and how we're tight, so this is a way to figure out what stretch is most beneficial for you. So I'm going to give you just a little anatomy lesson first about your hip flexors. We have three major muscles that connect your hip flexor, or that make up your hip flexor group. The first one is your iliopsoas. Your iliopsoas is actually two separate muscles that come together deep in your hip, your iliacus and your psoas. And the psoas actually connects onto your lumbar spine, which is kind of crazy. So it's a big, powerful muscle also to help support your core. Your rectus femoris is another one of your hip flexors, and that is also part of the quadriceps. So the quadriceps are your big thigh muscles here. Four separate muscles make up your quads, one of them being the rectus femoris, and that crosses your hip joint as well. Then you have what's called your tensor fasciae lata, or your TFL for short, and that's like a bunchy little muscle on the side of your hip here, and it connects down to your IT band. All right, so what you're gonna need, well, I like to have a chair because that way I don't have to worry about my balance, so I hold on to this while I'm stretching. I'm gonna go into a tall kneel position. I'm gonna be stretching my left hip flexor so you can see. And all you're gonna do is just put your right foot out in front of you with your hips squared forward. This position alone might give you a stretch. If it is, that's great. You might be a little tight, but that's okay. Just hold it for about 20 or 30 seconds. 3 times, and then you've got your stretch. Most of us are gonna need a little bit more. So from here, I'm gonna tighten my glute on my left leg, and that causes my pelvis to scoop backwards a little bit, okay? As it does that, that intensifies the stretch, and I'm starting to get a little stretch there. Again, that might be enough for you, and that's where you hold it. If you need a little bit more than just that pelvic scoop backwards by tightening your glute, you can slide your hips forward a little. Now it's important not to just drop forward. That's a different part of the stretch, which we will get to. But this time you're just gonna push your hips forward without arching your back. Remember, your back should stay neutral in all of these stretches because of that psoas muscle that connects to the spine. If you arch your back, you lose the stretch. So you're gonna lean forward here, and that should give you a deep stretch in the front of the hip. Anytime you feel a stretch that is good for you, that's where you're gonna stay, and you're gonna hold for 3 repetitions, 20 to 30 seconds. Longer holds, these are big, powerful muscles, so you wanna give them a little bit of time there to release. Okay, so those are some options, and then if you wanna go a little bit further, what you can do is take your hand on the outer part of your leg here, and this is gonna try to get a little bit more of the lateral fibers here. Okay, so I'm putting my hand here, and I'm actually twisting myself away a little bit. So I'm trying to turn so my chest is going away from this hip, ever so slightly. As I do that again, making sure my back isn't arching, and that can change where you feel the stretch ever so slightly. And if that feels good to you and that's where you need it, that's where you stay. Another option is, again, in the same position, a little forward with that scoop. Take your hand and you're gonna raise it up and across your body. You can side bend away from this hip a little bit as well. Make sure you're not leaning forward. Your arm can be in the same plane as your body or actually slightly behind you, like I'm reaching towards my back toes. That can intensify the stretch in the fibers a little bit deeper in the abdominal region. If this one feels good to you, that's where you hold your stretch. And you may feel a stretch in multiple positions, and that's okay. You can do all of them that feel right for your body. Okay, so those are some nice options to get all the fibers proximal or closer to your body in the hip, the front of the hip, and in the abdominal region. Let's talk about the quad a little. So the quadricep does cross your knee and your hip. Up here, you're in that nice open position, and this is where you can start letting your hips sink down a little bit. You may get a little added bonus of a stretch in this hamstring, just fine. I'm a little tight here, so I definitely feel that. And then otherwise, you're starting to get the stretch a little lower in your leg. So you're bringing in more of that rectus femoris. And here you can hold that, or if you really need more, you can come out of it a little and reach back, grab just below your ankle, try to keep your chest squared ahead of you so you're not twisting your body, and you can lean into it a little here. And that's a pretty intense stretch for me. It may be for some of you as well. Be sure not to crank on that leg or go too hard. Everything should feel like a strong stretch, but there should never be any pain. Again, you can hold that. Now I can see my back's arching a little bit. I want to try to come out of that. And so I'm not arching, okay? That was a no-no, so that's what not to do. So here, my back should be nice and straight, but you can tell I'm a little bit tight. This one's hard for me. And I'm gonna hold that, again, 20 to 30 seconds, 3 repetitions. So those are some options for stretching your hip flexors and kind of figuring out what works for you. Remember, you're stretching your muscles, but you're also stretching your connective tissue. So we're very layered beings, and you can't really stretch any one thing in isolation. These are good stretches for anybody who's human, really. If you're sitting, if you're walking, running, cycling, whatever it may be, we often need to work on lengthening the hip flexors a little bit. So I hope that you found that useful. You found where you're tight, and you can incorporate that through your post-workout stretches or just through your day. Thank you so much for joining me.